Before we have the roll call, I would like to invite the public. If anyone from the public is here and wishes to address the commission, please fill out one of the cards in the foyer. Give it to either the commission clerk or someone. They'll pass it along. This time we'll have the roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Cox. Here. Mr. Dominic. Present. Mr. Epperson. Here. Mr. Escaday. Here. Mr. Jenkins. Present. Mr. Lynn. Present. Ms. Lynch. Ms. McCullough. Mr. Pearson. Present. Mr. Smith. Here. Mr. Thibodeau. Here. Have a quorum, Mr. President.
All right, this time I will lead us in the invocation and ask Commissioner Epperson to lead us in the pledge. Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, be with us today as we deliberate the business of the people. Grant us wisdom so that we can do the right thing, not just for today, but for the future. Help us to come to a consensus so that we can work closely together for the betterment of the people of the parish. We thank you for the many, many blessings you've bestowed upon us. We ask you to protect all of our troops, our men and women. We thank you for the victory of our saints. As petty as that may be, some little bright thing, something so simple and insignificant that can bring a people together, not just of a state, but of a region, for minor distraction and diversion. Hopefully this thing will take. People will realize that we're all together, we're all citizens, we have more in common than we think as American people. We ask these and other blessings in your name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Raise the flag, then the proper salute. Repeat the pledge in unison.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Who that?
I told y'all.
Okay, this is a special meeting. It's on the headline. Are there any agenda additions? All right, being none. Now is the time for citizens' comments. Are there any citizens here who wish to address the commission? There being none. Now we'll move on to our order of business. We have two resolutions. If the first one should fail, the second one is not germane. What I would like to do is discuss the matter at hand, and basically that is our 1.95 debt service millage. We need to discuss whether or not we feel that this millage we need to ask for it to be rededicated for the future. I'd like everyone's thoughts on that so that we know where everybody stands. And if we do not feel like we need to do it and let it expire, then your suggestions on alternate sources of funding for capital projects. The only logical thing means we go back to pay as we go, which is an option certainly. There is money in the mineral fund, and there will continue to be money added to the mineral fund, so there's several options we can pay for it. Really, I'd like your thoughts. If you wish to speak, I'd ask you to speak just to those topics. Past history of bond issues, past administrators, and all these other things have nothing to do with what we're talking about today. So, we'll get an order. I will ask that everyone who wants an opportunity to speak be given it first, and then we'll go to the second round. And it's informal, so speak freely, but, get to the point if you don't mind. Everybody's certainly got things to do. So, that being said, I can't see who's up here, so I don't know who's leaping in. I need to learn how to use this thing, maybe?
No,
is that what it is?
they need to work right.
Oh, they need to get it to work right. Is they the city?
Doug.
Good. Okay. It's all right. Let's see who wants to speak.
Doug.
Was Doug first? You keep the list for me, please, Ken. Doug, who's next? If you wish to speak, just raise your hand. Mr. Epperson will take your name down. Okay.
Doug, Carl,
Baker. Okay, Mr. Dominic.
I'm sorry. That's it? Just three? I got Doug, Carl, and Mr. Baker so far. Okay. I think most of my questions are answered, but I did one thing. Basically, I sent an email to Erica and asked her several of the questions which I think are pertinent to the situation. Number one I asked was, on the proposals, the propositions 2, 3, and 4, when are they set to expire? And from the email I got back, one of the proposition, I guess it would be proposition number 2, the one related to public health, is set to expire on 5, I guess it's May 1st of 2010. So it has to, or it needs to be on, it's to expire next year, so it needs to be and has to be on the election this year. We've got to call an election for that proposition. So we're going to definitely have an election. So one of the issues would be, why not put the 1.95 out there and see how the voters feel about it. The second question I had was basically, what was other municipalities and other parishes' debt service millage rate compared to ours? Where are we at? Shreveport is 27.82. Orleans Parish is 25.50. St. Tammany Parish School Board is 20.90. Lafourche Parish is 17.20. St. John's Parish is 14.50. Caddo Parish School Board is 7.60. St. Charles Parish is 5.41. Lafayette is 5.4. St. James Parish is 3.15. And we're at the bottom at 1.95 mils on your debt service. And I don't know if we're in the lowest in the parish, but basically I was asking for comparables our size. I did ask on the changes that Woody had made, the ones that were highlighted, how much did that total to be? And she answered back 17.930. So maybe one of the questions would be, do we have to go out for 25 bond meal? Could we reduce it? And ultimately, it's my understanding, and I think Woody did an excellent job in explaining to this, if we have the 1.95 mil, we're going to be able to do a lot of projects, go out and borrow the money, capital projects, and do them in the near future in a more expedient way. It's going to keep your interest rate down, all the things that he outlined, rather than pay as you go. If you don't do the 1.95 mil, it's going to go away. And when did you tell me, Erica?
About 2029.
2029 is when that 1.95 mil goes. If we do what we say we're going to do, we can keep the 1.95 mil, do projects, capital improvement projects that needed to be done, and turn around, at least it's my understanding, and give the taxpayer a 1.95 millage reduction on their tax bill from the other tax millage. Is that correct, Erica?
That's correct.
And I, as a taxpayer, would rather get the 1.95 now than have to wait till 2023, whatever you said, to get a 1.95 mil reduction. And again, if you do away with the 1.95 mil, it's sometime in the future, be it 5, 10, 15 years down the road, and I'm not here, we're not here, you're going to probably need that millages to do other capital improvements, and therefore you're going to be out and actually going out for a tax increase. I don't know of any other way that we can do this. It really seems to make a lot of sense to me to continue the debt service millage at a 1.95. I think that we're going to have to do a good job explaining it to the people, to the citizens, to let them understand exactly what we're doing, which is not an increase. The other ones are renewals, and this is not an increase. It is to keep the millage rate at a very, very low amount that we currently are paid. I know Commissioner Epperson had asked a question on how much would this be on a $100,000 or $200,000 house, and I did the figures on that. If you had a $200,000 house and has homestead exemption, you only pay $24. At $100,000, it was only, I think, $4.85. It's not a lot of money. And it adds up. And Eric, how much money will that bring in? Do you know next year the 1.95 mil estimated?
The net amount is a little over $2 million.
You're going to be able to use that and bond out and do a lot of projects. It just makes a lot of sense to me. If you go to using your royalty interest or you go to using your oil income, that stuff's going to go away. It's going to go away, and we need to use that, in my opinion, on something that is It's going to affect the whole parish. It's going to make a legacy of us parish commissioners to the citizens. And that's how I feel about it. I think most of my questions have been answered.
Thank you, Mr. Dominic. Mr. Pearson?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dominic, Commissioner Dominic, because a lot of what you mentioned, and I won't be redundant and mention that, a couple of things that I do want to say is that it just makes good business sense. I'm going to support the renewal because it just makes good business sense. If we got to, and I think about myself as, and I don't like to use personal references, but if you had enough money, which I don't, but if you had enough money to buy something cash, some large expenditure, and you had good credit, and most of us would say, well, I'll use somebody else's money and use my money as collateral. And I look at this in a similar way, so that we can move forward with taking care of the business in an expedient manner instead of getting back to pay as you go. The other point I want to make, and I'll shut up, is that we experienced this year, which was important to me and several other commissioners, a large amount of expenditures for non-governmental appropriations, larger than I can remember we've ever had. Is that correct, Erica? Have we ever spent as much for NGOs?
Not that I can recall.
Okay, I can't recall any time since I've been here that we have spent as much for NGOs as we were spent this year. We were able to do that because, well, if you back into it, the citizens voted for us to be able to use some funding in the parish of, what do we call it?
Public Works and Public Works and Sales Tax for the road repair.
Yeah, but we were able to use that money in another way so that we can help the
rededication.
Yeah, rededication. That's the word I'm looking for. They voted to rededicate that fund so that we could use some of that in the criminal justice fund. Well, if we do that, we promised them that we would use the bond money to do what that money would do and even more. And I think we've done that. I think we've reinstituted that $2 million or whatever it was back so that what they were losing with the rededication money, they got it on the back end. And at the same time, the money that we get from riverboat boarding fees, we were able to use a lot more of that for non-governmental appropriations. And it's important to me, and it's been important to me and several of us for years, that we are able to use or give something back to our communities in regards to those non-governmental appropriations. So I was happy to be able to do that, and hopefully we can continue to do that and make and let the people know that this 1.95 will be something that will come back to them. We won't really lose anything. We'll be asking for the renewal, and at the same time we are promising to reduce taxes that same amount. So, and the other thing, Mr. Chairman, is that the $25 million is an authorization. It's not that we're going to spend. We're going to get money as we need it, but it's just an authorization up to $25 million. So we don't have to sell $25 million worth of bonds after the election. We can do 10 or 5 or whatever our needs are. So I wanted to make that clear so that we can move on. But I am going to support the issue, and those are some of the reasons why. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Both Commissioner Dominique and Commissioner Pearson have basically almost said everything that I wanted to say. one of the things I did want to make clear that the reason why I would be supporting this resolution because and I didn't want to get into a lot of old-fashioned cliches, but I was raised by my grandmother. She always used to teach us that, you know, you don't get rid of all your eggs and don't use up all your money. Always save a little something for a rainy day. And even when I heard that word pay-as-you-go that our president had mentioned, she was a believer in that pay-as-you-go, but she also was a believer in, you know, maybe having a little credit somewhere where if you have to get something huge done, make sure you have a little credit so you can go out and get something, you know, major done. And those are some of the things that we're looking at as far as getting some of these projects done. So, of course, you know, everyone knows about the fact that we have money in savings, that we have money coming in through the oil and gas, but I just look at that money as being some money that can be done to do a major project in the parish for our constituents to actually see what is actually being done with that money versus doing some project for maybe fixing a roof or a ceiling in a building that they don't actually get to see. So my thing is I'm not going to be long either. I'm going to support it, but I agree with Commissioner Dominique is that one of the things that we have to do as commissioners is to make sure that we give a good, clear understanding to our constituents as to what this millage is going to actually do. And also, like Commissioner Pearson say, you know, let them know that we don't have to do all this amount of money just because we have it there for us to do it. We can do whatever amount that we need if we go along. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Anyone else? The machine's working, so if you hit your request button now, I'll have you. Mr. Smith?
You know, the good book tells us, to him who is given much, much is expected. And truly we have been given much. And this commission has been judicious and careful with their expenditures over the years. And we are in good financial shape, it's true. So I'm going to support this. I think we'll continue to use the money wisely. And we have some great challenges ahead of us as a commission, and they're going to take some pretty big dollars. But I think we will have the opportunity to do those challenges and serve our people well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else? Okay. I'd just like to share my thoughts on this. I understand the administration's position and their preference, and I understand the comments of you guys. I tend to look at things from a non-governmental standpoint, and it's probably wrong in this body. I look at it more of from a business standpoint. And these things are kind of obvious to me. That we have the cash now, right now, in the oil and gas mineral funds to do all these projects, pay cash, and have money left over. And there's going to be more money coming in every year to that fund. Who knows what? They're still drilling wells. Who knows what the end of it will be? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 million a year. I don't know. I would be willing to bet, though, that if we prioritized the administration's projects and said next year we're going to pay as you go, that we could do 7 or 8 million worth of projects next year and still maintain the fund balance in that oil and gas mineral fund, and extra never eat into it and pay for it. Doing all these projects at once, it always sounds good, but it never happens that way. I know that I represent a very small area, but I know there's concerns, especially with the rural commissioners, that we have a very good fund balance in our road construction, bridge fund, maintenance and fund and all that. And there's a sentiment among this body that, you know, we don't do enough projects. We're not doing them fast enough. Whether or not we don't want the staff to do it, I don't know. The money's there, and you know the need is there. So, you know, what do you do? So, from a strictly business standpoint, if I'm a businessman and say I've got good fund balances, I have got a very good reserve trust fund in case there's a catastrophe, in case the economy just really goes bad, more than adequate. My credit rating is good, and I have the cash flow, and I have the projected cash flow to continue to do these things, and not just the critical things. I'm talking about build a boat launch at the lake. There's a lot of things we can do. Why would I want to go borrow money no matter how cheap it is, if I've got the cash, one, to pay for it, and I know I'm going to have the anticipated cash flow to replace that cash, probably at the same rate that we can get these projects done. I'm not advocating one way or another, and I'm not saying either way is wrong. I'm just saying there's another option. And I know that, the governmental mindset and the history is you never give up a tax because you may never get it back. Well, there was a time when we used to fight, or not so much fight, but struggle to find a way to pay as you go our capital projects and really had to prioritize them. Now we don't have that problem. We have the blessing of this manna from heaven, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. And I understand that to let this tax expire is slow tax relief. But even you make the argument to a junior high student that you go ahead and you let us indebt you and loan us this money, and we're going to give it back to you in the form of tax relief, and you have all this other money that we have set aside, and our projected revenues in oil and gas are going to be high, then they go, why are you doing that? Why bother? And maybe in normal times, to not let a tax expire would be the good thing. Because you're right, they're very difficult to get back. But in light of our blessings, in light of our balance sheet, in light of the situation that we're in, I don't know how we can not let this expire. It may not be the normal thing to do. It's certainly out of the norm. But it does not necessarily mean at this point in this time that it's the right thing. And I understand the point of recurring revenues, but these oil and gas wells, as you can talk to any landman and geologist, they've probably got a good life of 8 to 12 years. Okay? That's normal bond elections, 10 years. And at that point in time, if the parish should be in different shape, then I don't know why, unless the economy is just really trashed out bad, the voters of this parish wouldn't say, we'll give them a bond initiative, or the resources for that, for projects if they need it 10 or 15 years from now. Because you know what they did? When they had extra, instead of keeping it, they kept what they needed in the reasonable reserve, and they gave back what they didn't need, which is really the function of government, if you think about it. It is not to stockpile cash. It is not to hoard away money. It is to take what we need to provide the services for the people we represent as best we can, to keep a reasonable reserve, and not take any more than we need. Now, even though we're not taking it, we've got this extra income. And, I hate to say this publicly, I guess the libertarian in me now, and is just giving me a hard time with this. But that's my thoughts on it. Anyone else? Mr. Thibodeau?
I have a question for Erica. The debt service millage is $195 now. What would it be for 2011?
We've calculated that it would be 1.25.
1.25?
If you did nothing, 1.25.
If you did nothing. And if we kept it at 1.95, then that would give us decimal 75 mils over and above what we needed to pay. Would we have to have bonds outstanding already and to be allowed to collect that decimal 75 mils addition?
Right. We can only collect 1 year's debt service, and we already have 1 year's debt service in reserve. So we've recognized that we already have the max in reserve that we can have on hand. So we couldn't over collect.
So we would have to go out for a bond issue of some kind between now and 2011.
Right. If we can show that we have authorization we would have to go out sometime between. But
in order to be able to keep it.
We're estimating that if you did, it wouldn't be. $5 million is the max at that point. If you did, it definitely wouldn't be the $25 million. But once you issue that amount, we think that the 1.95 will stand still for about 6 years, and that all depends on the assessment. Because as you pay it down, as assessment goes up, this 1.95 may become too much again. As long as assessments are increasing. Does that answer your question?
Could that decimal 75 be used to pay down the debt?
No.
If you have more than you need to meet the annual debt payment, you can't use anything over that to pay down debt.
No, you're only supposed to collect enough to pay the current year's debt service. If you wanted to pay down your debt, you would have to take it from
Somewhere else.
other.
Take it out of-
somewhere else.
Wherever.
Take it from one of our other accounts. Yeah, take it from all of
Okay, well, I just wanted to, I got this basic from Erica. I had done this, and what amazes me is we came up with almost the same numbers, which is kind of scary that I got it right, but she gave us a deal. What I did is I took the fund balance as anticipated for the end of 2010, and the total fund balance on all funds was going to be about $142 million. And of that amount, approximately 86,000 of it is restricted by law. The only way we could do anything with that would be to go to the voters and ask them to rededicate. Then the remainder, 56,000, which is basically the general fund, oil and gas fund, the riverboat fund, the reserve trust fund, the economic development fund. That $56 million is basically the commission has direct control over that. So we can move those monies around as we determine to do so, if we so chose to do that. So if the 1.95 mills per debt is not renewed, first of all, it's not going to all disappear next year. It's going to disappear a little bit at a time. And then we still have $56 million of which we could do projects with if we so desire. So not all of the money is restricted. About 39% of it is not restricted. And that was helpful to me, and I thought it might be helpful to other people. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thibodeau. Anyone else on round one? You should speak, Mr. Jenkins. You're not showing up.
Okay. I wanted to ask Commissioner Thibodeau, explain that again. You say now? What are you saying?
All right. At the end of 2010, it is estimated that of all our funds, all funds that we have, there'll be $142 million in surplus. That's of every fund we have. But those funds were basically broken down into restricted funds, which were restricted by the law, saying that in order to spend this money differently than what you're spending it, you're going to have to go out to the people and ask them to rededicate it so you can spend it somewhere else. But then there's $56 million of which is not restricted other than by this commission. And that $56 million is made up of the oil and gas fund, the reserve trust, the riverboat, the economic development, and all those, the money that are in those funds, we have stated, informally what we want to do with the money. But if the commission decided to fund some project out of these monies, we have the ability to do it. We don't have to go to the voters for it. And that's the only point I was making. There was a certain amount of the money that the commission can move around if they deem necessary, but the rest of it is restricted basically by law. And you'd have to go to the people for a vote to spend it differently than what you're spending it.
And I asked that question, I guess, because at some point here, we took a pretty significant sum of our oil and gas money and we put it into the reserve trust fund. And I think I was saying at that time, if we're taking our money and we're putting it over there, it's very difficult to get the money back out to do something else. And I really believe in the long run, that's going to be a part of what's going to be a challenge for this to go forward. Because in my mind, what you're doing, you're telling the taxpayers to allow you to use some more of their money, but you want to save all of your money. And I think that's the impression that a lot of people are going to get from this. But, Mr. President, I agree with what you're saying about this, but I did tell Mr. Wilson, and I think I told Ms. Bryant too, I'm going to try to keep my commitment there. I don't have a problem with this going forward to the voters to make a decision. And I just want to reiterate my position. I do not want that to be looked at as though I'm in support of the initiative. I think that our citizens can certainly take a look at this and decide what's in their best interest. I believe your timing on it is bad. I believe you made some bad moves going into it. I'm just giving you my honest feeling about it. I think you take $17.5 million of our money and stash it away somewhere, and I go ask the citizen to fund the projects that well, not we, but that you are listing out. To me, it's going to be an uphill battle on this initiative. I think that's one of the points that people are going to remind you of. And then I just don't think the kind of dialogue that 12 elected people up here should have had about all this ever took place. I don't think we ever sat down and talked with each other. I think we did some talking at each other. We never sat down and talked with each other about what to do. I'm going to keep my commitment to administration to the extent that I would not hinder this from going forward to the citizens. But it's not something that I'm going to get out in the community trying to support. I just want to be straight about how I feel about it. But I did make a commitment to you that I'll do that, and I want you to know if I say something to you, you can rely upon it. Okay? Thank you, Mr. President.
Jenkins. Anyone else first round? Dominic?
Just a few points. One of the things, if I'm understanding Commissioner Thibodeau right, we have the unrestricted and restricted by the Commission, which totals to be about $56 million. Close to half of that, almost $30 million, is a reserve trust fund that would only be used in emergency situations. And about another quarter of that, $15 million, is oil and gas fund, which to me, which we talked about, I'm hoping that we use that on something that can make a lasting legacy for this parish. We talked about the water district, and we've talked about getting that going. How are we going to get it going? We're going to pay for that. Now, I'm not saying that's going to cost $15 million, but it's going to cost a lot. And if we go to using all of these funds, I'm afraid it's going to inhibit our ability to do the things that we would really, really like to do in the future. And I understand, Commissioner Escudé, what you're saying from a practical standpoint. But there's another issue that we're talking about, and I'd like, Erica, could you please explain this to us? Because right now, the 1.95 mil, if it goes away, it's going to be, what year? You keep 2029. 2029.
Well, it'll take until 2029 for it to completely go away.
Right.
But we would start reducing it.
I understand that. Explain to me, or this body, one more time, our intentions, if this went before the voters for 1.95 mil, we could turn around next year, and give them a 1.95 savings in taxes. Can you explain how that's exactly going to work?
Yes, sir.
Because you can do a better job than I can, I know. That's why I'm asking you.
Yes, sir. And that's why we feel like that it's not a situation where we're saying we want to take your money and save our money, because we're saying, hey, we want to get your money for the debt service, but we want to give it back to you in other operational millages. So we're saying within our other millages that we...
Speak up, I can't hear you.
We're saying that in the other millages outside of debt service, if we maintain the 1.95 in debt service, that we could reduce the other millages by 1.95. I have an analysis here where I...
Could I make a request to have Erica come down in front so everybody could actually hear?
Okay.
Kind of like a mouse sometimes.
There's no way to speak up.
Thank you.
Little finger, we're going to be here.
Stand up there.
Need to sit?
Oh, wait. Randy's passing out an analysis that I put together to show where we are currently, where we estimated our net revenue. When we say net revenue, I'm speaking of, we've calculated what we think that will go uncollected, what we think that won't get paid to us, because every year someone doesn't pay their taxes. And so, based on our 2009 net revenue, we feel like that if we reduce in 2011, we would see only a $500,000 difference between what we collect for 2009 and what we estimate that we can collect for 2011 with a 1.95 reduction. We believe that based on the surpluses that some of the funds have been experiencing, that we can put forth a 1.95 reduction. The reason we prefer to do it that way as opposed to trying to give a 1.95 reduction on debt service is because of the restriction. Because all these fund balances can't be used for any type of projects, whereas the $25 million can be used for whatever projects this commission so desire. We don't have to worry about whether or not it's for parks or buildings, but the way our money stands now, that is a consideration. The one thing I do want to point out when we talked about maybe rededicating that public works, even though you see nearly $30 million in there, you have to remember that sales tax monies cannot be used inside the city limits of Shreveport or Vivian. It has to be used outside of Shreveport and Vivian. So you couldn't, even if you rededicated, you couldn't do a courthouse project with it because it's in the city limits of Shreveport, because those citizens don't pay that sales tax. And that's where a lion's share of their money comes from. Now, the other funds, he's correct, that you could use those monies for projects if that's an alternative that the commission decides.
But it's because you have a healthy reserve fund on certain funds, you're going to be able to give a reduction on that and thereby pass a reduction to the taxpayers. And I know that's kind of hard to understand and explain, but, you know, this is, to me, a way to give a reduction immediately rather than down the road. Right, and that's exactly why we don't think it's a situation where we're saving the money, because we're saying we're going to give it back to you in another means. Right. We're going to ask you not to pay a 1.95 in another way. And we think that with the increase in assessments over time, that you'll recoup that money back. You'll recoup that millage back. If you go out for these projects in another way by using some of these other funds, I think it's going to cause problems on stuff that you would have to do. You know, the CCC or the things that would pop up at the courthouse, etc. It just looks like the best business approach to do the 1.95. And I am not for increasing taxes. The renewals are renewals, and the way y'all presented this to me, to keep the 1.95 in place, but turn around and pass a 1.95 reduction in taxes to the taxpayers, makes sense.
Okay, let me, Mr. Wilson, for the record, where did that idea come from?
From you, sir.
Thank you.
That's right.
You keep saying we. That was my idea, because there was no way I was even going to get off first base to even consider this. You're right. Without that.
Well, I'll rephrase it. That was a good idea.
Well, I don't want to cry. I just want you to understand this was an administrative thing here. That was the first thing out of my mouth.
Well, you didn't tell me. I mean, it came from her.
Okay. Well,
what I'm feeling. So
I want you to understand.
Well, but I want to take. No, we did not.
Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
Commissioner, that's a good idea. You need to support it now. You came up with a good idea.
Well, we just thought that it was a great idea, and we got on the bandwagon.
That's plenty. That's plenty.
Keep on. He may start supporting here in a minute, okay? Oh, God.
Okay. Dominic, got some more?
When Commissioner Escudé, you and I have talked about it, and about, sending the taxpayer reduction, and that was a wonderful, wonderful idea. I did not know it was your idea, but that, was one of the things that sold it to me. So, and I know there's other options, but I think it goes back to what Commissioner Pearson said. It seems like a good business approach, or the best business approach.
Okay. Before we move on to who's going to list us, anyone have any questions for Ms. Bryant while she's there? Ms. Baker, have her first.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, thank you. Will the taxpayers get a tax reduction either or, if it passed or if it do not pass?
Yes, the taxpayers, if you do not go for this initiative, we're estimating a 0.7 reduction in 2011 on the millages, on the debt service millage, that we'd reduce it to 1.25.
1.25. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Thibodeau?
I got my question answered.
All right, thank you. All right, Nick, any more for Ms. Bryant? Ms. Bryant? Yes, Mr. Lynn?
Ms. Bryant, could you give me the scenario as if this tax was not renewed and we reduced the millage 1.95 both for Caddo Parish?
Yes, if we do not maintain the 1.95. You would see a reduction to 1.25.
And the 195 immediately. If we did the mixed scenario.
Oh.
Your worst case scenario.
Right. I don't think that the budget, the numbers and the growth that we're projecting could sustain a 1.95 reduction in the operating millages as well as a 0.7. You would be obligated to do that 0.7 because we pretty much have to by law. The 1.95, I just based on the growth in the future of the expenses and also maybe having to take some of that money for capital projects as we go forward, that we could sustain a 1.95 reduction in that manner also. Does that answer your question? I can't give you a scenario that it actually work out that way. It just would not be a recommendation that I would want to make. Now, that's something that the commission obviously can do, but it's not something that I would want to recommend.
The point of clarification, Mr. Lynn, for all practical purposes, that in addition to rolling back with tax property millages, which has been our historical policy, at any given time in any fund, in which the conditions are the same, we can reduce millages in any given year. And that's always in the authority of this body. It could perhaps come to a time where our oil and gas revenue is such enormous an amount that we may very well do that. That's always an option. It's not.
I recognized it as an option. I was the longevity of repairs.
Well, it depends on where you reduce the millage from, and you'd have to choose your funds carefully so not to put them in jeopardy. Okay, Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. President.
About ought to call him sheriff.
Oh, God. I had to
arrest this man.
Okay. We're talking about pay-as-you-go projects. I've got a project that's in my area that I've been working with Robert and Tim and Whittington on, that's going to probably cost, what, $3 million, Robert? Or more? It could be high. And we're talking about a project that's been in my area that it hadn't been overlooked, but it never was a problem until yards started sinking in. So I'm looking at a project in my area that's going to take a big chunk of change to do. That needs to be done, that can't be put off too much longer. So when we start talking about pay-as-you-go, that'd be nice. I mean, I'd love to do it in my day-to-day life and all that good stuff, but can we do it as a public body to the commission and keep our goals as a commission for 10 years down the road? That's my question. I mean, we have a lot of expectations of where Caddo should be as far as when I-49 comes in and the 13 interchanges come in and we have to do projects along I-49. Can we do it as a pay-as-you-go? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I'm not a big... I told my constituents in my area that we're going to try to reduce taxes on them as much as we can. Because at this given time, the parish has been blessed with what we consider, something we didn't even think about 5 years ago. Now we have an obligation to the citizens who are, even though we're doing pretty good, we still have citizens out there that are hurting. We have citizens that are out there still out of work for 6 months to over a year. We still have citizens out there trying to make ends meet to pay their taxes now. So when we do this, and we talk about the 1.95 mil, it runs out in 2029 estimated. If we can if we can take it out at 1.95 out of the other ones and give them that immediate tax break, that's what I look at. Businesses, I mean, they get a break. People get a break. The downside of that pay-as-you-go is that sooner or later you're going to come up on so many projects as we grow as a parish. Can we pay? And I'm not saying that hole is going to dry up on the gas, but we don't know from month to month, year to year, exactly how much we're going to get. So that's basically, I mean, we're looking out for the people of Caddo Parish. That's our job. So when you're making your decision today, think of the people of Caddo Parish. Thank you.
Mr. Pearson.
I'm reminded, of a sister city who built a parking garage with reserve money and having some problems. And I think our responsibility is not just for right now, but 2 years from now, some of us will be gone. 3-4 years from now, some more of us will be gone, and there'll be new people sitting where we sit. And I certainly want to try to leave them in the best financial shape, that we can leave them, especially with the decision making that we're trying to do now. And I certainly want to leave them in the best situation I can. But I think about that when I think about spending, pay as you go, because now that city is in some dire straits. And I was here in 2004 when we had to lay off 19 people, I think 19 to 20. And it's not a fun thing to do to look at somebody. And I'm not sure whether, I'm hoping that the oil and gas situation will last forever. But now if we start having some problems with the water, Mr. Smith, and we start losing cows, and we start having any kind of difficulty with how that oil and gas is handling our environment, then we could end up stop drilling. We could end up with a situation where the drilling would have to stop if it became an environmental issue. And so I just think about all of the things that's involved, and I'm hoping that the people will decide, to maintain their debt service millage, because it's just the right thing to do. It just makes good sense at this point. And at any time, this commission feels that, hey, we got enough money to pay the bond off. We could pay it out of general. Why are you smiling like that? You don't want to give us that money, but we could do it. We could decide that we got enough money in oil and gas, let's pay it off, and then we have to reduce the debt service, the debt service millage, to a certain point. I mean, we could do that. Right. But I would just hate to lose the debt service. I'd just hate to lose. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm through now.
Thibodeau.
There were two things I was most concerned about with this ordinance. Number one is I want us to stay financially strong. Number two, tax relief, and probably tax relief was pretty strong, at least in my district. And this is about the craziest thing I've ever seen. If this ordinance passes, if the commission agrees to send this to the voters, and it passes, they get an immediate 1.95 tax relief, right?
When we present, if it passes, when we prepare the 2011 budget, we would prepare the 2011 budget with a 1.95 reduction.
But
we'd actually vote on it till the next year, but
I understand. But if the irony of it is, if it fails, in other words, if we don't vote for it, it's going to take 19 years for the public to get a 1.95 tax relief. Right. And that just hit me on the side of the head a minute ago, that they would get a decimal, they'd get decimal 770 mills relief immediately, or in 2011, if this thing fails. But if it passes, they get 1.95. It's about the craziest thing I've ever heard, and I guess that's the new Obamonomics or something. I don't know what it is, but that's today's plan.
Stay a moment.
Up until about 2 minutes ago. Up until about 2 minutes ago, I was not going to vote for this, but then I finally got to this aged head of mine, brain, that if I want to give immediate tax relief, the most I can give citizens in 2011 is 1.95, but they have, the commission is going to have to vote for this to go on the ballot, and then they're going to have to approve it. Now, whether or not they approve it is another story. Well, I don't know if they will or not. And if it fails, the best we can give them is a decimal 70 mills, and it would take 19 years to give them the 1.95. So I guess it's the first time I've ever heard of borrowing money and it costing the taxpayer less than what it does if we don't borrow money. So
that's abominable.
I guess that's why we're $12.9 trillion in debt.
But he didn't start that.
What I just said, is that correct, or am I hallucinating?
That's essentially correct, and that's why I don't believe it's the fact that you're saving your money and not using, because actually you're saying we'll give it back.
Well, that in itself is true, but then again, it's not true. You're saying that if this fails, the only tax relief they get is 0.70. That's if we take no further action.
Right. That's true.
We can do this. Let's not be trapped into we have to hold on to this thing. That's the only way to give them immediate tax relief, because it's not. We may choose not to do it different, but that's disingenuous to take that approach.
Well, I don't think it is.
It's not recommended. I mean, if you
want them, if it passes and you give them 1.95 tax relief, then you still have the ability to give further tax relief if the commission so desires.
Exactly.
It is the commission. I mean, you adopt your millages each year, and you get to set them at what you'd like to see them.
Okay. That's all I have.
Now, you're really twisted, aren't you?
Like a pretzel.
Okay, Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, first of all, Obama has nothing to do with this.
Bush's fault. We know.
It's all Bush. It's all blame it on Bush.
It always be blamed on Bush.
But in all seriousness, I want to be clear on to my constituents as to what I'm voting on today, and in general to the citizens of this parish as to what I'm voting on today. And I think the real question here is, our vote today is really not a vote to give anybody any tax relief. We can try to fashion it with all that, but that's really a question of semantics. All we're really doing today is at least my vote today, is to allow this to go to the citizens. And the question that's going to the citizens is simply a request of them, should we incur this debt? That's the way the proposition even reads. And so for those citizens who may be, inclined to look at this, I think they need to take a look at it and decide. They need to make a decision as to whether or not we should incur this debt. Now, my vote today, I don't want it to be taken as any guarantees of any kind of tax relief, because I'm not convinced of that myself. And I certainly don't want it to be taken as any kind of support or opposition, for that matter, to the proposition, because I still think there's some things that need to happen between now and election day on this matter. But I do think, and I hope that we would take a look at allowing the thing to go to the citizens so that they can take a look at it and make a decision, have a healthy debate about it, and make a decision as to whether or not we should be allowed to incur the debt. That's what my vote is about today. So I don't want to get lost in, I'm hearing all this, I'm not buying all this about this tax relief stuff and moving money around. I'm not buying any of that. I want to be clear on that. But I do feel like our citizens have the intellect and the intelligence to be able to look at this and have a healthy debate about it and make a decision as to whether they feel like this is in their best interest. And whatever they should say about that, I'm willing to live with it. But that's what my vote here today is really all about. So I believe this was the second round, so I just want to get my second round in. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Just like to add my final thoughts. This is a strange issue, no doubt. But it'd be kind of like if my son came to me and told me he needed $300 for his paternity dues when they were only $100. You know. And I mean, I'm sure we might have experienced that raising children with a little suspicion there. My basic core belief is that we are taking in currently with our tax structure that's given us by the voters, by way of sales tax or property taxes, what the voters have allowed us to run this parish. And we've done well, even when we didn't have money, we did well. Now all of a sudden, it's like we had Rent Uncle pass away, and we've got a big check. That check belongs to the people of Caddo Parish. What we're saying is, even though we're taking care of everything, we won't keep it all. If you ever had somebody leave you and your sibling something and then had to work out who got what, then I don't have to tell you how complicated that can get. But for us to say, well, we're going to keep it all, and because we know what's best for you, I don't know. I think maybe that, I don't know if that's right or not, because the voters didn't give us this extra money. You know, I prefer to think, you know, manna from heaven as I refer to it. But it is the people's money. And we have much more right now than we need. And we're going to continue to take more than we need. And we could let this thing expire and adjust millages next year to give them 1.95 immediate relief, or 3 points, or whatever mills we determine that we really have in excess. Let's use the word obscene excess of what we need. You know, not all excess is not bad, but there's a point of obscenity, and it's going to get there if this money keeps stockpiling. Now, if we really want to do something, just think about this. We could decide that since we have this extra revenue coming in, that we should have foregone the increase in property taxes that we've received just because of the what I consider erroneous property assessments that happened last year. We didn't roll forward. We left everything neutral. Our property tax revenue should have been the exact same. Because of what I think a lot of people in this room feel, and I know personally in my business, and I feel like I was unfairly assessed in the middle of a recession, telling me my property values went way up. You know, we still benefited from that. What was it, close to $3 million? Okay? Yeah.
Yes.
So, not our mistake, but revenues did increase, even though our intentions was to hold property tax revenues level and neutral. We still increased $3 million. Now, what's the right thing on that? I don't know. I only want to finish on this. I want to clarify one thing. When I first met with Mr. Wilson, Ms. Bryant about this, and they told us this was coming up, my first reaction was, nope, I'm not going to support it unless it's revenue neutral. That's the idea to offset it that came about. And I still was apprehensive about it, met with them again, and, you know, and thought, okay. And I did say, fine, I'll go out there and we'll tee it up. But if you want to consider that a commitment, consider it. I have had a change of heart since then. We have increased our oil and gas mineral fund since then, leasing all the land, these royalty checks coming in. Our projections are different than what they first were when we discussed this. Our future prospects look even much more brighter. And on that basis, you know, I personally don't feel it's the right thing to do. If it is the will of this body that we put it before the voters, I'm not going to go out there and raise a hand against it. I promise you. I can only promise you this. As Mr. Jenkins is sure his constituents understand, he said, mine do too. No way I'm going out there and selling with a straight face. So, that's where I'm at on that. Because I'm a pretty good salesman, but I'm not that good. Anyway, I truly don't think we need it. I think we can do other things. We have other options. So I will defer to the majority will of this body, and we'll do what we can once it's decided. Now, I have one question before we proceed. and I should have talked to Mr. Grubb before this, since this is on an agenda item on a special meeting, are we able to act on this today officially?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. At this point, we have nothing. If there's possibly a motion. We have two resolutions on the agenda. Resolution 12. It is ordering the calling of a special election.
So moved for Resolution 12.
Been moved by Commissioner Pearson. Seconded by Commissioner Dominic. Any discussion on the motion?
Second by Dominic.
Dominic, yes. Anyone like to discuss it? Okay. We'll vote when we're ready. When we're ready. That passes. The second resolution is that this body, we are committing to reduce millage rates in the event that this renewal passes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Dominic, seconded by Commissioner Baker. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Dominic.
It does say in there, if I remember correctly, that the commitment is to reduce it 1.95. Is that correct?
That's because that's what it'll stay at if it passes, yes.
Yes, sir. We also put Mr. Thibodeau's modifying language on it that he suggested to last.
Okay. Good job. That's all I have.
Mike? Mr. Thibodeau?
I didn't see that in there either. That was my question. I didn't see a number in there. Should be a minimum of 1.95.
It says, reduced by, in year, by at least 1.95 mils, and we do the same reduction throughout subsequent years to the extent deemed feasible.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Very good. Mr. Jenkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will not support resolution number 13 because I think it's a farce. I don't think that this resolution can bind future commission bodies and make them abide by it. I think if we did a resolution, it could probably only go through the terms of the commissioners who are here right now. So I believe that this resolution, with all due respect, I'm not trying to tackle it with the author of the resolution. I think the idea is a noble idea. I think the intentions are good, but I think it's misleading to try to tell the public that once some of us are no longer here, that future commission bodies, by this resolution, is going to give them some kind of reduction on their taxes to the tune of 1.95 mils. So I will not be voting for it for that reason.
Any other discussion on the motion? I appreciate Mr. Jenkins' comments. I see it different. I don't think it obligates future bodies. I think it's a powerful suggestion. I think to go to the voters and just and for us to tell them that this is our intentions and it's probably only good for 1 year is not going to cut it. The previous body, those that precede us at any time, can contradict or change this resolution. I don't think it doesn't bind them legally, and they can certainly change it at any time. I think there's enough flexibility in it. All right. Anyone else?
I would, but I'll change my mind.
All right. Well, let's vote, please. And that passes. Being no other business, we're adjourned.
You want to give me a chance to say that?
Oh, I didn't, Carl.